The developing story around Congressman Matt Gaetz has even some of his Republican colleagues taking pot shots, at least behind the scenes, according to a piece in The Insider. Dishy texts are circulating around Washington, one even stating that Congressman Gaetz is, quote, the meanest person in politics. Pretty high bar.
Democratic strategist, founding partner in Northern Star Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins, and White House reporter for Real Clear Politics, Phil Wegman, back to discuss. Phil, in another life, I recall you writing a profile of Matt Gaetz. You probably know him a bit well. What's going on here? I've never seen somebody so more widely disliked by his colleagues. How do you think it's going to fare, this entire political crisis for him?
Well, when I profiled him back in 2017, I remember asking him about how he was becoming famous on the right and infamous on the left. And his response was, if my memory is correct, he said, what's the difference, right? And so the fact that Matt Gaetz doesn't have a lot of friends in Washington, D.C. right now is a reflection of the fact that he realized, rather than going through the ranks in the majoritarian House and spending his time preparing to get a subcommittee chairmanship, he was going to cut in line and get in front of a camera. That worked really well during the Trump era of politics. He also made a lot of people very angry. Obviously, pick a name, right? Pick a name in Republican leadership right now. They're probably pissed off at him. So I'm not surprised that he doesn't have a lot of friends. In terms of the allegations, though, I'm withholding judgment because no one pays me for my opinions, first of all. Second of all, it's very interesting. Either Gaetz is wildly conspiratorial on the question of these investigations, and he's just completely over his skis, or perhaps there's more to the story that we haven't learned just yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
There definitely is more to the story because the story doesn't make any damn sense at the moment. So there's got to be some. I mean, nobody has any idea what's going on here. He could be lying. The guy who says he's extorting him could be lying. They could both be lying. It could all be true. None of it could be. We have no idea. But, Michael, I do think part of the problem for someone like him, and actually reminds me a little bit of Andrew Cuomo, is it's not just Democrats that don't like Matt Gaetz. As Philip is saying, everybody hates Matt Gaetz. I don't want to say everybody. Almost everybody hates Matt Gaetz in this town because he's just not a nice person. Like, just put aside his politics, his views, his, grandstanding, whatever. He just doesn't treat people well. And it's the same thing with Andrew Cuomo. And so when you find yourself in hot water and you haven't gone out of your way to make a lot of friends, you can really quickly find yourself out on a limb by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Gaetz is learning what I think a lot of politicians in D.C. learn. When you fly too close to the sun, when you treat people like crap, at some point you're going to have a scandal and no one is going to come to your defense. Look, I hope this isn't true just because it's a tragedy and it's the kind of thing you don't really want to root for. But Matt Gaetz is an asshole, and he has been an asshole for a long time. And, now he's having to deal with that. The chickens are coming home to roost. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I think the only Republican less popular in their caucus than Matt Gaetz is Ted Cruz, and that says something.
Well, actually, no. Ted Cruz is having a bit of a renaissance at the moment. I think Gaetz is definitely up there.
He takes the cake.
Phil, here's my real question around Gaetz and all of this, which is that the behavior, look, now without commenting on whether they're true, we ran through all of it this morning. It's extraordinarily complicated. I think there two things could both be true in terms of the extortion and the specific allegation, or they could be mutually exclusive, or they could both be false. I have no idea. The real question here is around that incentive, as you were talking about, around getting famous by basically pissing everybody off, and now finding yourself within this situation. Now, him leaking preemptively, I'm going to assume, I don't know, about this move to Newsmax and more, that does seem to indicate that this could be very serious enough for him to consider leaving Congress early. And that is a very bad sign, no?
Yeah, the trajectory of yesterday, we start with Newsmax, which is like, oh, okay, Gaetz wants to go to Newsmax. That's interesting. Then the New York Times story drops, and it's like, oh, okay, that move makes a lot more sense now. Then we see the Axios reporting, which is, wait a minute, there's apparently text messages where he's talking to someone who tried to extort him. Later, there's a Tucker Carlson interview where he talks about how his dad wore a wire. I mean, this is so cliche and terrible, but it does seem a little bit like a House of Cards episode. I mean, what we're hearing here in terms of all of this stuff, these allegations, this plot itself is, building upon itself rapidly. I would caution, anyone who wants to immediately, I guess backing up really quickly, I think the larger point here is just, look, Matt Gaetz knew that the center of politics was Donald Trump.
Yep.
He clung to that. He cut in front of others to get in front of the camera. That served him very well, and that served him well because Trump has not gone away. So he still has, staying power on the right, and especially cable news. But that is drying up, and I think that unless these allegations are resolved, I think that Matt Gaetz' star is significantly diminished.
I think you're right.
Well, and Michael, that is actually an interesting point. There may be no one in Washington who has modeled themselves and their behavior after Donald Trump more than Matt Gaetz. But you're not president of the United States. So you don't get, Trump could, I think, because of the unique nature of his personality, but also because he was president of the United States and extraordinarily powerful and had a lot of goodies and favors and other things that he could give, that puts you in a very unique position. If you're, one member of Congress, I don't know that you can get away with quite the same style of politics.
Yeah, and all along, Matt Gaetz has kind of been that bro-ish person who liked to get under people's skin. There were, the allegations, there was the DUI when he was in state legislator. He's messy. And I think at the end of the day, Republicans aren't going to come to his defense. The allegations are really serious and damaging to his career. I don't know how he survives it. This isn't like a Cuomo situation where he can just kind of wait it out, especially because it's an underage girl. So, Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Phil, the last question for you. Will Republican leadership be relieved if they just can watch this play out and him go away with them not having to actually do anything?
Oh, absolutely. Republican leadership is more than happy to get rebel rousers like Matt Gaetz out of there. And look, I know that we do not like the way that Matt Gaetz has conducted himself. I don't think that there's anyone in politics who's looking around and saying, that guy's really nice.
Yeah.
But I think one of the reasons why Matt Gaetz is hated in Washington, and obviously it's not completely analogous to Cruz, but there is something there. He's hated in Washington, but he's beloved back in his district.
That's
he's
true.
loved back in his district because he gives the impression that he is fighting for the things that they want. And I think that, in his mind, he truly believes that he is. This is especially interesting moment. And look, I want to see the text messages. I want the DOJ to comment. Don't keep us, waiting.
Yeah.
I agree. Let's get it all out there, especially when it's a member of Congress like this, capture the public.
Let's hear the tapes. Call on the tapes.
Roll
put
the tapes.
I want to hear the
Yes,
tapes,
I'm
too.
calling on the tapes as well. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it. All right, next on Rising, our friend and host of Bad Faith Podcast, Brianna Joy Grace, who joins us when Rising continues.